This is Whisper from History, where forgotten voices rise again. That day seemed just like any other, but when 5 Navy bomber planes took off, everything changed. Within hours, their final radio message sent chills down every spine. No wreckage, no bodies, no answers. Only silence still echoing through the waters of the Atlantic. If you missed our 32-episode Season 1, Dark History, watch the full playlist on our channel. December 5, 1945. A day that began like any other at Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The air was warm, the horizon painted in soft gold by the winter sun. 5 sleek Grumman TBM Avenger torpedo bombers sat lined on the runway, engines rumbling, propellers slicing through the humid air. Their mission was simple, a routine training exercise. Navigation problem number 1. It was meant to test their endurance, their navigation, and their discipline. Nothing extraordinary, nothing dangerous. But what began as a calm afternoon flight would soon become one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history. The squadron was designated Flight 19, 5 aircraft, 14 men, led by Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor, an experienced pilot and veteran of the Pacific Theater. He had flown combat missions, survived enemy fire, and returned home alive. For the younger pilots under his command, Taylor was a symbol of precision and courage. The plan was straightforward. Fly east from Fort Lauderdale, 120 miles over the Atlantic Ocean, then north, then back southwest to complete a triangular route and return home. A journey of about 300 miles, just another day's training. At 2:10 p.m., Flight 19 took off, roaring into the open blue sky. Ground crews watched them fade into the distance, unaware that none of them would ever return. The early stages went smoothly. The pilots communicated in clear, calm tones. Their first leg was completed right on schedule. They turned north, exactly as planned. But by 3:40 p.m., something changed. Radio operators began to notice tension in the pilots' voices. There was confusion, uncertainty about their position. The sea below looked the same in every direction. The sun, hidden behind gathering clouds, made it difficult to orient themselves. And then came the first transmission that chilled everyone at base. "This is FT-28. Both my compasses are out. I'm trying to find Fort Lauderdale, but everything looks wrong." It was Lieutenant Taylor's voice, steady but strained. He believed they had somehow flown over the Florida Keys, south of their intended route. He thought they were over the Gulf of Mexico, but the truth was far worse. They were flying northeast deeper into the vast Atlantic. On the ground, radio operators tried to guide them back. "If you're over the Keys, turn north. You'll hit the mainland." But Taylor wasn't sure. He hesitated, a fatal hesitation. He kept turning the squadron north, believing land was somewhere ahead. But there was nothing, only endless waves. Minutes turned into hours. The sky grew darker. Fuel was running low. And then, another message crackled through the static. "We can't tell where we are. Everything is wrong. Even the ocean doesn't look like it should." The voices of the young pilots, once confident, were now trembling. The training flight had become a fight for survival. Back at Fort Lauderdale, the base scrambled into emergency mode. A massive air and sea rescue operation was launched. 2 PBM Mariner rescue planes took off into the fading light to find the lost Avengers. At 6:20 p.m., Flight 19 sent one final, fragmented message. "All planes close up tight. We'll have to ditch together when the first plane's fuel runs out." Then silence. No further radio contact was ever made. No radar blips, no signal flares, nothing. Flight 19, 5 aircraft and 14 men had vanished without a trace. But the night held one more tragedy. At 7:27 p.m., one of the PBM Mariner rescue planes also disappeared from radar. There was a bright flash seen by a ship in the area, followed by the smell of gasoline on the water. It had exploded mid-air. All 13 crew members were lost, 27 men gone in a single night. The search intensified. More than 300 aircraft and 13 ships combed over 300,000 square miles of ocean. For 5 days, they searched every possible route, every island, every shadow on the water. Not a single piece of wreckage was found. No oil slicks, no life vests, nothing. It was as if the ocean itself had swallowed them whole. In the days that followed, newspapers across America filled with headlines: Flight of Navy planes vanishes off Florida. Mystery of the lost patrol. Families of the crew members waited in agony for news that never came. The Navy, desperate for answers, launched one of the largest investigations in its history. They interviewed dozens of witnesses, radio operators, and meteorologists. They examined Taylor's record, his training, his recent flights, even his mental state. The findings were inconclusive. The final Navy report read, "Cause of disappearance, unknown." But behind closed doors, some officers whispered about stranger possibilities. The first theory was navigation error. Taylor had been new to the Fort Lauderdale area. He was known to rely heavily on his compass, and that day, both his instruments malfunctioned. Without them, even an experienced pilot could become lost over featureless ocean. But skeptics argued, if he was truly off course, why didn't any of the other 4 pilots, each with functioning compasses, correct him? Why did they all follow him blindly into oblivion? Another theory suggested severe weather. Sudden storms were common in that region. Perhaps violent downdrafts had dragged the planes into the sea before they could send distress calls. But again, not a single piece of debris ever washed ashore. The most haunting theory came from whispers within the ranks, something supernatural. The region where Flight 19 vanished was part of what would later be called the Bermuda Triangle, a stretch of ocean stretching between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, long associated with strange disappearances, magnetic anomalies, and unexplained phenomena. At the time, no one called it that, but in the years that followed, writers and researchers would point to Flight 19 as its defining mystery. Eyewitness reports added fuel to the fire. A merchant ship crew claimed to have seen a formation of planes flying eastward. Shortly before sunset, far from where they should have been, another ship reported mysterious lights low over the horizon before fading suddenly into the night. Some claimed to have heard weak radio signals, garbled words like "Don't come after me." They looked like before static consumed the line. Were these real transmissions? Or echoes, fragments bouncing across the ionosphere long after the planes were gone? No one could say for certain. Years passed. Technology advanced. Satellites mapped every inch of the ocean floor. Still no trace. In 1989, a group of divers exploring the seabed off the Florida coast thought they had found Flight 19, 5 TBM Avengers, lying eerily together, 800 feet below the surface. The excitement was electric finally. After decades, closure seemed possible. But when the serial numbers were checked, the truth was devastating. The planes were not from Flight 19. They belonged to another training group, lost at sea on different dates. The mystery deepened. Lieutenant Charles Taylor remains one of the most controversial figures in naval aviation history. Some blamed him for leading his men to their deaths. Others defended him, insisting that his compasses truly failed, and that he did everything he could under impossible conditions. In 1947, 2 years after the disappearance, the Navy quietly cleared Taylor of responsibility. They stated he was not at fault, his instruments had malfunctioned. But for many, the absolution came too late. For the families left behind, there were no graves to visit, only names engraved on the marble walls of the Fort Lauderdale. Naval Air Station Museum, a silent testament to men who flew into legend. As decades went by, Flight 19 became more than a military mystery. It became part of American folklore. Books, documentaries, and even Hollywood films immortalized the event. In Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Steven Spielberg depicted the planes as being abducted, returned years later, untouched, engines intact. For some, this was pure fiction. But for others, it felt like a metaphor for something that still haunted the sea. Because even now, 8 decades later, the ocean keeps its secret. And somewhere, deep beneath the waves, the story of Flight 19 still waits to be told. Why did 5 aircraft vanish in perfect formation, without a single distress beacon, oil slick, or wreckage? Why did the rescue plane disappear in the same area within hours? Coincidence? Or something far darker? In 2015, 70 years after the event, the U.S. Coast Guard issued a statement calling the Bermuda Triangle a myth. They explained that the area experiences heavy traffic, sudden weather changes, and strong Gulf Stream currents, all natural explanations for disappearances. And yet, when oceanographers mapped the region, they discovered unusual magnetic fluctuations, minor, but real, capable of affecting navigation instruments. Just enough to confuse a pilot flying by compass alone. Could this have been what doomed Flight 19? A subtle magnetic storm, invisible to the eye but deadly in its deception. Or did something else happen that day, something we still can't comprehend? Today, when you stand at the memorial in Fort Lauderdale, the names of those 14 airmen are etched into stone. Their faces frozen in black and white photographs, stare back from a time when the world was just learning to master the skies. Each December 5th, veterans and families gather to lay wreaths beneath the memorial. A lone bugle plays taps, and for a moment, the wind from the Atlantic carries the faint sound of propellers, as if the ghosts of Flight 19 still circle above, forever searching for home. Perhaps they were victims of navigational failure. Perhaps they crashed beneath a storm-torn sky. Or perhaps, just perhaps, they crossed a threshold we still don't understand. Because even now, 8 decades later, the ocean keeps its secret, and somewhere, deep beneath the waves, the story of Flight 19 still waits to be told. Centuries have passed since that tragedy, but the ocean still remains silent. 5 planes, 14 men, all vanished. Maybe it was a storm, or a magnetic failure, or something far beyond human understanding. No one truly knows, but somewhere deep beneath the waves, the story of Flight 19 still lives on, waiting for someone who can hear the silence to hear more stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe to Whisper from History.